Earth was quiet for a long time. When the great meetings across the stars took place, the people of Earth only listened. The great halls of the Interstellar Council were filled with rulers and leaders from faraway worlds. They spoke of power, wealth, glory, and victories. They laughed, they argued, they boasted, and often their voices carried the sting of insults. When the subjects of Earth were spoken of, the tone was nearly always cruel. They called Earth small and weak. They mocked its men and women, saying they had no courage to rule or to fight. For all this scorn, Earth remained silent. Isabella, who sat on her throne in the grand palace of Earth, watched and waited. She had long dark hair that fell across her shoulders, and her eyes gave nothing away. She listened to the taunts. She heard the laughter, yet she kept her hands folded and her voice calm. To the outsiders, she seemed like a queen with no anger, as though she cared nothing for her honor or the pride of her people. They believed silence meant weakness. But Earth was not as it appeared. Far beneath the green hills and the blue skies, in hidden places where the stars could not see, Earth's soldiers trained every single day. In wide stone halls, men like Daniel, Marcus, and Ethan marched until their feet ached. They lifted heavy weights until their muscles were steel. They fought each other with wooden swords until their hands bled. They trained in silence, never asking when the day would come, but certain that the day must.
Oh.
Daniel was strong and steady, never boasting, but never failing. Marcus was fierce and bold, always the first to step into a challenge. Ethan was quick and clever, light on his feet yet full of fire. Alongside them stood Adrian, who fought with a calm that could unsettle any rival. They were only four of many, for across the world thousands of men drilled the same way, waiting for Queen Isabella to give the word. None of them left their posts. None of them questioned the silence. High above the clouds, in orbital docks hidden in shadow, the true strength of Earth was growing. Great steel warships floated in stillness, their frames shaped for speed, their cannons cold and waiting. Engineers worked without rest, polishing the hulls, fitting the engines, loading supplies. The ships were kept from sight, hidden from the prying eyes of enemy spies. They were like swords sheathed in the dark, ready to be drawn by a steady hand. The people of Earth went about their lives with few, knowing how much was kept from them. Farmers planted their fields, children studied in schools, merchants opened their shops. To the outside worlds, this seemed like normal life, simple and harmless. Yet beneath this gentle surface lay a foundation of steel. Patience was the choice of their queen, not a chain forced upon her. When the next council meeting gathered, and Earth once more sat in silence, the scorn grew sharper. One ruler stood in the central chamber and called the men of Earth useless. Another laughed that Queen Isabella ruled over nothing better than mud. The chamber roared with cruel delight. Across the stars such words carried, spreading fast. Still, Queen Isabella spoke only calm words. She looked neither broken nor provoked. She gave no sign of anger, no piece of rage, no show of trembling hands. To many she seemed almost too patient, perhaps even fearful. Yet far away in the hidden halls, the ships and soldiers continued to prepare. The quiet of Earth was not weakness, it was readiness. Stillness was not surrender, it was the waiting breath before a storm. For a time longer, Earth stayed silent. Every man who trained, every engine that roared in the hidden docks, and every glance of the Queen's steady eyes promised the same truth. The silence would not last forever. The day came when the insults reached their sharpest edge, and the patience of Earth was tested more than ever before. The great council hall was filled with rulers from across the stars. Their robes glittered with jewels, their crowns shone under the light of the chamber, and their voices rose with pride and arrogance. Earth once again sent its queen and her chosen men to stand among them. Queen Isabella sat tall and poised in her chair of stone, with Daniel, Marcus, Ethan, and Adrian standing close behind her as guards and witnesses. For years she had listened without reply while others hurled words meant to wound her. They had called her people silent because they were frightened. They had called her soldiers weak because they did not boast. This day those voices rose higher and harsher. One ruler pointed across the chamber toward Queen Isabella and spoke in a cruel voice that carried through the room. Said the men of Earth had no strength, no honor, and no courage. He said that even in battle, they would be on their knees before the first strike was made. Another ruler laughed and joined in, saying the Queen of Earth ruled not men but servants who bent like grass in the wind. The chamber filled with mocking laughter. For a moment the air was thick with the noise of their scorn. It rattled against the walls of stone like thunder. Every insult was passed across the stars by messengers and voices, spreading the shame of Earth as though it were a tale to amuse children. Daniel stood behind his queen with his fists closed tight. His heart beat hard and his face burned with fury. Marcus stared forward, ready to speak if only his queen commanded it. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on every ruler who laughed, counting their faces and remembering them one by one. Adrian stayed as calm as always, but behind that calm there was fire.
Oh!
None of them spoke without command. They knew their queen would decide, and they would act when she gave the word. Queen Isabella remained still for what seemed longer than a heartbeat. The laughter slowly faded when they saw she was unshaken. Her face did not twist with anger, nor did her eyes lower with shame. She rose from her seat with calm hands resting on the arm of her throne. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was steady and low, yet it carried across the chamber more clearly than the shouted insults. She said that Earth had listened long enough. She said that men born on Earth knew the weight of pain, the cost of work, and the price of war. She told them that silence was not weakness, but discipline. She told them that patience was not fear, but strength. Then her words sharpened. She said their insults would not be forgotten, she said. Every cruel laugh had been counted, every word remembered, every look of disdain engraved like a scar. The hall grew quiet. The rulers who had thrown insults leaned back in their seats, unsure for the first time. A ripple of unease passed through them. It was then that she gave a command not spoken before. She turned to her chosen men and said one word: prepare. The meaning was clear. It's no longer would Earth stand silent. It's no longer would its ships remain hidden. The storm that had waited behind the walls of patience would be loosed. Daniel felt his chest rise with pride. Marcus gripped the hilt of his sword and felt his strength double. Ethan smiled with a spark of fire in his eyes. Adrian bowed his head in simple respect, ready to act. When Queen Isabella returned to her seat and the council meeting ended, the echoes of her words remained behind. Across the stars, men told the tale of that day. Soon they would see what it meant when silence ended, for the people of Earth had been insulted too far. Their quiet was finished, and their answer was near. The answer of Earth came faster than anyone believed. Across the stars, whispers spread first. Then the sound of engines louder than storms followed. Black-hulled warships left the hidden docks above Earth and moved into the disputed skies. They did not appear as scattered groups, but as a fleet strong and sharp, flying in perfect lines. Each ship carried the mark of Earth upon its hull, and every man aboard had trained for this very day. At the front of the fleet was Daniel. He stood on the command bridge of a heavy warship, steady as always, his eyes fixed on the great star fields before him. The crew trusted him without hesitation. He spoke with short commands, and no one doubted. When Daniel ordered the ships forward, they answered like one body, engines roaring in unison. Marcus guided a strike group on the right flank. His voice carried raw force and fire. He lived for the moment when shields clashed and blades drew sparks. He pushed his squadron into tight formation, ready to break through enemy lines with speed and bold strikes. His men followed him, as if he were fire leading them into night. Ethan was at the head of the drop forces. He wore armor sealed tight and carried weapons made for speed and precision. His task was to descend from the ships and tear through enemy strongholds on the ground. He smiled as the dropships shook with power before release. Where Daniel was calm and Marcus was fierce, Ethan felt the thrill of every heartbeat that came before battle. Adrian stayed close to Queen Isabella aboard her flagship. His duty was not only to fight, but also to remain near the Queen herself. He watched the councils of war with clear eyes and steady breath. Where others grew tense, he remained centered, a man who fought without haste and without wasted movement.
Ow.
When the time for violence came, he would act with quiet certainty. The first clash came at the rim of the Red Star systems. Enemy ships waiting there laughed at the sight of Earth's banners. They expected silence again. They expected surrender. What they received was fire. Daniel gave the order, and the fleet opened with a storm of cannon blasts. The black sky burned bright with lines of red and white. Steel tore through steel, and the voices of those who once mocked Earth broke with fear. Marcus drove his strike group like knives through the side of the enemy fleet. His ship cut close, cannons firing at short range. He grinned as explosions bloomed across the void. His men shouted loud with him, the roar of pride carrying over the channels. They spoke not of fear, but of victory. Ethan's dropships fell from the sky with trails of flame behind them. He laughed as the ground grew close, his hand gripping his rifle. When the doors opened and the soldiers of Earth rushed out, he was the first to set his feet on the soil. His squad tore through towers and walls. Enemy guards stumbled back, shocked by the force of men who moved with the speed of fire and the power of iron. Ethan did not stop until the stronghold fell, its gates shattered, and its banners pulled down. Adrian fought in a narrow corridor when the enemy broke through onto the Queen's vessel. He wielded his blade with calm poise, each strike clean and final. The intruders came in groups, yet he cut them down one by one, his face unshaken. He was silent in fury, a figure who seemed almost like stone in the smoke. The day ended with Earth's banners raised across skies that had once mocked them. Entire fleets lay broken, and strongholds that took centuries to build fell within hours. Across the stars, news spread not of weak silence, but of unyielding strength. Those who had once insulted Earth now whispered in fear. The silence of Earth was finished. With fire, steel, and the courage of its men, Earth had spoken its first true answer. That answer shook the galaxy. The victories of Earth spread like wildfire across the stars, and fear settled into the hearts of those who had once laughed. Cities long thought untouchable now burned with human banners set high above their walls. Fortresses that had never fallen were broken in days by the might of Earth's men. The rulers who had spoken with pride now whispered and plotted in secret chambers, asking each other how this new storm could be stopped. When the Great Council called again, the hall was filled not with mocking voices, but with unease. The rulers gathered in their jeweled robes, waiting for Queen Isabella to arrive. Some hoped she would surrender after showing her strength, but many feared she had only begun. The air was heavy with tension. For the first time, no one dared to make jokes about Earth while waiting. Queen Isabella entered the chamber with her guard behind her. Daniel, Marcus, Ethan, and Adrian walked at her side, their presence sharp and unflinching. The Queen wore no crown that day. Her dress was simple and black, and her steps were steady. The rulers looked at her and felt as though the weight of her silence pressed down on them even harder than her victories had. When she took her place at the center of the stone hall, voices rose to speak to her. One ruler demanded that she explain herself. Another shouted that Earth had no right to strike with such fire. A third waved his hands and declared that her silence had fooled them, that her people had acted as traitors. The chamber filled with cries of anger, fear, and confusion. But Queen Isabella raised her hand, and the voices fell silent. She stood tall, looking into every face with eyes that never wavered. She began to speak in a voice that did not tremble. She told them she had listened to their insults long enough. She told them she had endured words meant to cut down her people and break their pride. She told them she had been patient, but patience had been mistaken for weakness. That mistake had ended. Screens lit across the chamber. Images of Earth's victories filled the air. Ships exploding under the fire of Daniel's fleet. Marcus forcing enemy squadrons into retreat. Ethan leading his men through shattered gates and raising the banner of Earth on high. Adrian standing like a wall as he defended her ship with calm and fire in his strikes. Every victory and every fallen fortress appeared before their eyes as proof. The rulers who had laughed now swallowed their words. Some shifted in their seats, unable to meet her gaze. Others clenched their fists, too proud to show fear, yet too shaken to speak. Queen Isabella's voice grew sharp. She said Earth did not seek to rule the stars without reason, but Earth would no longer be mocked. She reminded them that her men had been called cowards, her throne called weak, her people called nothing but mud. She declared that those who spoke such words had invited the wrath of Earth upon themselves. Now, they knew what humans could do when pushed to the edge. Daniel stood firm at her side, his strength plain in his silence. Marcus's eyes burned with pride, ready for a fight if the council dared insult their queen once again. Ethan kept a faint smile, eager to answer any challenge with fire. Adrian remained calm, his gaze steady on the rulers who once mocked Earth. The chamber grew so quiet that the sound of breathing could be heard. The rulers were trapped between their pride and the fear now knotted in their hearts. For the first time, the The weight of Earth had pressed harder on them than their own armies ever had. Queen Isabella ended her speech with steady words that struck like iron. She said patience had ended, silence had ended, and now respect would be given. If not by choice, then by force. She stepped down from the center as Daniel, Marcus, Ethan, and Adrian closed around her like a wall of strength. The rulers could only watch as she left the chamber. They did not laugh, they did not speak. They knew now what it meant when a patient queen stood in fire and revealed the storm she had hidden. Earth was no longer silent, and the galaxy would never see it the same again. The final battle came sooner than many expected. Across the stars, word spread that the last and strongest gathering of Earth's enemies had formed above a crimson world. Every ruler who hated Earth or feared its rise sent their greatest ships to join the stand. The skies above that world were filled with steel, cannons, and banners of defiance. They believed that together, they could crush Earth's new strength and silence Queen Isabella forever. But the Queen had already chosen her answer. From the skies above Earth, her fleet sailed out, larger in number than anyone had seen before. At the head was her flagship, black as night, carrying her and her closest men. Behind her followed Daniel commanding the vanguard, Marcus leading his strike wings, Ethan waiting with his drop soldiers, and Adrian ready at her side. None doubted, none feared. Their silence had been long, but now their voices were iron. When the two fleets met above the crimson world, the sky turned into fire. Daniel stood at the bridge of his warship, his eyes steady. He gave clear commands that cut through the storm. His ship struck the enemy front, breaking formation with disciplined blasts. Every time an enemy vessel tried to close its ranks, Daniel guided his men through the weakness with calm strength. The front line collapsed under his leadership. Marcus led his strike wings like a raging flame. He pushed into the flanks, cutting through enemy groups that thought their numbers were enough. He laughed as his cannons struck true, and his men shouted with him as they drove deeper. Marcus carried the fight with raw force, crashing into those who dared stand in his way. His fury turned whole squadrons into wrecks, drifting in the sky. Ethan waited until his ships pierced the enemy formation. Then the dropships released. They fell fast through burning skies with Ethan standing first in line. His armor rattled with each blast, but he did not stop. When the doors opened and the soldiers leapt out, Ethan charged ahead. He stormed through the gates of the enemy capital ship, rifle flashing in his hands. Hallways filled with smoke as he fought his way to the control decks. His men followed him without pause. In moments, the great ship that stood as the heart of the enemy fleet was in human hands. Adrian fought where the danger was closest to the Queen. On her flagship, the enemy boarded in waves, hoping to cut off the head of Earth by striking her throne. Adrian stepped forward alone at the gates of the ship's core. His blade moved like water, yet struck with the weight of stone. Group after group fell before him. His breaths were calm, his face steady, his strikes final. No enemy reached Queen Isabella while he still drew breath. Through the battle, the Queen herself stood before the command deck's great window, watching the storm her people created. She did not boast or cry out, but her eyes burned with the truth of her spirit. When the enemy fleet began to break, when ships turned to flee, she gave the final command. Pursue. No more would Earth allow insults and laughter to slide free of punishment. Respect would be carved into the skies with fire. By the end of the battle, the crimson sky was filled with ruins. Those who had once called Earth weak had lost their greatest strength. Their banners were torn away. Their rulers were forced to kneel before the storm they had mocked. Daniel, Marcus, Ethan, and Adrian stood with the Queen as victory was declared. Their faces were marked with sweat and blood, but their pride was unshaken. Queen Isabella's voice then rang across every channel and carried into every hall, every city, and every home across the stars. She declared that Earth had been mocked and insulted, yet it had not broken. It had been silent, but silence was never weakness. It was patience, and patience had ended. She warned that those who mocked them again would pay with fire and steel. The stars grew quiet at her words. No rulers laughed, no voices mocked. They understood now the cost of their insults. Earth was no longer silent. Earth was a storm that no one dared provoke again. And so the name of Earth became more than a word of dirt and fields. It became a name of fire discipline, and pride. It became the voice of men and women who endured and then struck with power greater than any had believed. The silence was gone forever, replaced by thunder that would echo through the stars for generations.